Hello, it's 12 o'clock and welcome everyone. We are so excited from WAMPO staff. We are really excited to invite you all for this Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050 open house. At this time, I would like to introduce our staff who is lead on this public engagement, Marky Jonas. Marky, please.
Thank you, Chad. Hello, my name is Marky Jonas. I'm the community planner here at WAMPO. And so we're just gonna go over a few things today and hopefully not have too many technical issues. Are the slides showing up for everyone? Okay, perfect. All right. So today we're just gonna kind of go over everything, and then do an introduction to what is the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and then what is a Metropolitan Transportation Plan? And then we will go over the plan that we are currently having as our draft document, MTP 2050, and then how to engage, and then we'll have a Q&A opportunity. To start off, we have a video just that kind of is a nice intro to WAMPO. Hopefully the sound will work on this.
Welcome to the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, your gateway to a better connected future. WAMPO isn't just an organization, it's a visionary collective, meticulously crafting a roadmap for progress. Founded in 1974, WAMPO is the beating heart of metropolitan transportation planning, ensuring that our communities thrive in harmony.
This is a partnership and collaboration that makes the wise investment of our federal transportation dollars, and also it brings us united and brings us all together so that the decisions made are meaningful to the public. It addresses the most prioritized transportation needs in our region.
And WAMPO understands that transportation is the thread that binds economic vitality, air quality, social equity, environmental sustainability, and overall quality of life. Our story unfolds within 22 vibrant cities and stretches across 3 dynamic counties, encompassing a diverse blend of urban centers and peaceful rural expanses. From the bustling streets of our cities to the tranquil lanes of our countryside, WAMPO's influence is far-reaching.
I think the biggest impact that they've had is related to the reconstruction of Main Street here in Hayesville. We had some areas that would flood, and they were able to take care of that. WAMPO's efforts make sure that my customers and employees can reach us easily.
You know, we can definitely feel the impact that WAMPO has had with the Meridian Street project. Going to extend 77th Street's access straight into our parking lot. It makes it a lot safer for us to get in and out, and will do nothing but enhance the Main Street Center.
WAMPO partners with the state of Kansas and Wichita Transit to usher in a brighter tomorrow. The mission? To meticulously carry out the metropolitan transportation planning process, ensuring seamless connections, efficient mobility, and sustainable growth. Whether you're taking the bus, bicycling to work, or strolling through your neighborhood park, WAMPO's fingerprints are everywhere, orchestrating a symphony of movement that benefits us all.
Safety has been greatly enhanced. The kids are now walking on the sidewalks and not in the streets. We have a beautiful park up here now. Access to that park has been greatly enhanced.
Join us on this journey of possibility. Explore, engage, and embrace the transformation that WAMPO nurtures every day. Together, let's shape a Wichita metropolitan region that's not just connected, but truly united.
Okay, so to follow up with that and share a little bit more about what is WAMPO. WAMPO, or the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, is the federally required metropolitan planning organization, or MPO, for the Wichita metropolitan region. And any urbanized area with a population over 50,000, it is federally required to have an MPO. And this provides local elected officials and the community more input into the planning and implementation of federal transportation funds. The Wichita Metropolitan Area Planning Organization is also a transportation management area because we have a population over 200,000. As of the 2020 census, the population in our planning boundary was about 550,000. And that means that we are able to allocate funding directly to projects within the WAMPO region. And with that, we generally have about 10 to 15 million per year that we are able to allocate to those local projects. We do both long range and short range transportation planning with that. Here's a map of our planning boundary. As you can see, it encompasses all of Sedgwick County and portions of Butler and Sumner counties. And then in total, it is 22 cities, and it is and portions or all of those 3 counties. So what is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan? That is our long-range plan. It is a federally required plan. It is federally required for us to have this plan. So right now we are working on an update, which will replace our previous MTP, and this one is extending out to the year 2050. And we are in the final stages of that. Right now we are in our draft public comment period, and it is also our 4th round of public engagement. And so in order to do this plan, we have looked at a lot of data and regional trends, and then also had a lot of public feedback that has gone into this as well. It's really a comprehensive look at the region. As you can see in this public engagement timeline, we did 3 rounds of public engagement to build an understanding of the public. And right now we are wanting to present the plan for feedback and comments. A bit more information on this. In the plan, it does include a project list that was approved by the Transportation Policy Body, which is our governing body. And that makes those projects, once the document is approved, available for federal funding when it is available in the next 25 years. So all draft chapters and appendices for MTP 2050 are available on our website, and our public comment period is open. Began on March 8th, and it will continue through April 7th. And this is the time when any public comments and feedback is really what we are seeking. Following that, once we receive comments and are able to address those and incorporate them into the plan, we will bring the plan to our technical advisory committee for recommendation, and then to our transportation policy body for approval. And following approval, we will do a 5th round to introduce the approved plan to the public. A few more details about public engagement round 4 that is currently in progress. Comments can either be submitted online on the project website, which is www.wampo.org/MTP2050, or they can be emailed to wampo@wampo.org. Right now, we're having our virtual public meeting, which will be recorded and then posted on the project website as an on-demand option for people to learn more and get involved. And then we're also having an open house 2 weeks from now on March 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. And that will be held at the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're also going to other public meetings and events to discuss the plan with the public and seek more feedback at those as well. I will now turn it over to Nick Flanders to kind of give an overview of some of the chapters in the document.
Thank you, Marky. The main document of MTP 2050 has 7 chapters and 14 appendices on top of that. We are going to go more so into the chapters and the appendices here for obvious reasons. Chapter 1, Plan Purpose and Development. Chapter 2, Regional Trends. Chapter 3, Existing Conditions. Chapter 4, System Management. Chapter 5, System Performance Report, which is where you will find information about performance measures, i.e., measurable statistics that can be used to track the state of the transportation system and progress towards meeting the goals of the plan. This includes required federal performance measures, but then also some regional performance measures that we developed for the WAMPO region. Chapter 6 is the financial plan. The point of that chapter is to show how the MTP is fiscally constrained, i.e., it does not plan for more spending than what is expected in revenue during the same time. Chapter 7, finally, is project selection and list. The main thing here is that that chapter includes a list of specific projects and categories of projects that qualify to be implemented over the horizon of the plan and have been found to be within the fiscal constraint analysis of the previous chapter. Next slide, please. Here are the 14 appendices. Now we're going to go into each of the chapters I just listed, but we'll not go too much into these appendices, but suffice to say, the appendices are long and they feed into the chapters. Appendix A, plan development. Appendix B, public involvement and engagement summary. Appendix C, the MTP amendment procedures, because it can be amended in between the 5-year adoptions, but there is a procedure for that to happen and conditions that need to be met. Appendix D, the project scoring model, which was used as a tool to help determine the project list. Just one of the tools. Appendix E, the cost estimation model for candidate projects. Appendix F, the travel demand model forecasts. WAMPO maintains a computer model of travel demand in the region and how that loads onto the transportation network, and it forecasts out to the year 2050 to predict what future traffic will be like based off of expected demand and facilities. Appendix G, the congestion management process. That is actually a planning document that we adopted as a standalone and is something that we are required as a transportation management area to have. But we are including it here as an appendix in addition to it being approved on its own. Appendix H, regional ITS architecture, i.e. a required plan that we are supposed to adopt regarding all of the intelligent transportation systems in the region. That is stuff like coordinated traffic signals and messaging for motorists who need to get around a new wreck and stuff like that. Appendix I, Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, CSAP, Crash Data Analysis. This is another plan that we already have adopted on its own, but which we are also including here as an appendix. And this plan, as the name suggests, is all about safety and how we can achieve our safety goals in the region, specifically getting fatalities and serious injuries from roadway crashes as far down to zero as we can. Appendix J, Regional Transit Implementation Plan. This is a plan we have developed for how public transit throughout the region can be improved, including across areas that currently are not served by the same transit agencies. Appendix K, Active Transportation Plan. This is a plan that we are in the process of developing that will go into planning for bicycle travel, pedestrian travel, and other non-motorized travel in the region, i.e. people traveling without a car or on a bus. Appendix L, the Electric Vehicle Network Plan. Pretty self-explanatory. It is all about plans for electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the region. Appendix M, commuter flows. goes into how many people in the region both live and work in the same city versus work in one and live in another. And this is used to show city by city how their flows work out, i.e., do more workers come in than go out, or vice versa. And finally, Appendix N, economic development analysis. This is a lengthy appendix that goes into a great deal of economic analysis for the region. Don't need to go into much more on that. Next slide, please. And now we're just going to show you quickly where these draft chapters and appendices are located on www.wampo.org/MTP 2050. They're divided between two tabs, one for the 7 chapters, next slide, and one for the 14 appendices. And each chapter and each appendix is in there as a separate PDF for ease of navigation. Next slide, please. And now, finally, we are going to get into the 7 chapters of the plan. And for these, we will switch presenters a couple of times. Chapter 1, Plan, Purpose, and Development. This is a basic introductory chapter. It explains the federal regulations that govern metropolitan planning organizations and that require them to adopt metropolitan transportation plans at least once every 5 years, with a planning horizon that goes at least 20 years into the future. And it explains the reasons behind these requirements and why we do them and why it would be a good idea to do them even if they weren't required. This chapter also provides an introduction to the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization specifically, both as a region and as an organization. It summarizes the planning process that we have followed up to this point, which included, and this is of course a vast oversimplification, how we determined the vision and goals for the MTP and identified needs and baseline conditions through data analysis and public engagement, such as, well, this right now. And finally, we developed a fiscally constrained project list based off of all of that. Chapter 1 also lists related planning documents and various committees of the WAMPO organization that have contributed to all of these plans. It briefly summarizes the public engagement activities that have been done for MTP 2050. And finally, it introduces the vision, goals, and objectives of the plan and how they align with the U.S. Department of Transportation's 10 federal planning factors that an MTP needs to be consistent with. Next slide, please. Now, just to get you the center of it all, the vision of MTP 2050 is to enhance connectivity in a way that supports equitable development of a safe, reliable, multimodal transportation network that enriches the quality of place within the WAMPO region. And the achievement of this vision is served by the goals of making things safe and reliable, equitable and accessible, connected and multimodal, and promoting environmental and financial stewardship. And each of these goals is then served by its own set of objectives, but we won't get into that right at this moment, but suffice to say, you can find that information near the end of chapter 1. Next slide, please, and I'll turn things over to Peter Moore.
Thank you, Nick. The next 2-3 chapters really look at the region as a whole and existing conditions And we're going to start here with Chapter 2, Regional Trends. So explains the regional economic sectors, residential expansion, transportation networks, and impacts on the environment and equity. And we'll go through each one of these sections with just a real brief slide and an example of what's in there, one by one. If you could advance to the next slide. So in 2.1 and 2.2 is the regional connections and demographics. So it looks at broad growth trends in employment and population throughout the region, and then looks at the current and past demographics. As an example, you can see the WAMPO population pyramid per the U.S. Census Bureau. Can advance to the next slide. 2.3 and 2.4 looks at education and housing. Again, a lot of census data, and looks at the distribution of schools and the scale of the regional education system. Then it delves into the region's past and present household characteristics. Okay, hence next slide. And then we have 2.5 and 2.6 looks at employment and jobs and travel. So 2.5 looks at the current and projected regional employment and highlights trends across different industry sectors. And 2.6 looks at the regional commuting patterns and other transit usage. I would also suggest looking at our commuter flows appendix to look at that in even more detail. As an example, you can see in 2.6, we have the Wichita Transit Demand Response, and that looks at the origins and destinations of those trips in that heat. Next slide. In 2.7 and 2.8 looks at environmental resources and environmental justice. So 2.7 looks at the transportation's environmental impact, and then 2.8 identifies and assesses impacts on minority and low-income populations. And just as an example, what you can find in that chapter in 2.8, you can see the regional minority low-income populations as captured by the American Community Survey from the U.S. Census. Next slide. And then chapter 3, our existing conditions, describes the existing transportation infrastructure and services in the WAMPO region. And we'll go through these one by one. Next slide. So the roadways and bridges and transit and paratransit in 3.1 and 3.2. 3.1 looks at the current network of bridges and roads and the intensity of usage on the national highway system. And 3.2 summarizes the existing conditions of regional transit and paratransit services. So in 3.1, you can see the annual average daily traffic on the national highway system and where the most amount of traffic is by both the size of the roadway and also the darker color. Next slide, please. 3.3, we look at bicycle and pedestrian. So it looks like the current state of regional bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and identifies potential means for future improvement. Again, just as another selected example, we have the bicycle and pedestrian estimated annual average daily traffic projections based on our count that we do annually in September. Just another selected examples. There was so much in each of these chapters, we try to just pick out a single highlight that we could make a bit more parsable. Mark, if you can advance to the next slide. So 3.4 is our freight chapter. So examines existing freight routes and the movement of goods across various transportation modes, including highways, railways, and air transport. Here is our primary highway freight network. We do have a federal source that we get this from, and the exact name is escaping me, but it is publicly available where we can get a lot of this information, specifically that includes railways and air transport. Next slide. And then finally, our section 3.5 looks at electric vehicles and provides an overview of the current electric vehicle infrastructure and potential routes for future deployments and opportunities for funding. Again, we also do have an EV appendix that elaborates even more on this, but you can see this is a map of electric vehicle chargers in the WAMPO region. Next slide. And that brings us to chapter 4. And this describes how the transportation network is maintained and managed. And we'll go through these again, just kind of one by one on each section. Next slide. So 4.1 was an introduction, so we'll start with the ones that have the meat in it. So 4.2, the existing maintenance needs and programs. It gives a brief overview of infrastructure condition. Below you can see the bridge condition between good, fair, and poor, the number of bridges beyond just the national highway system. And then it gives an overview of some potential funding programs for maintenance. Examples include the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, or STBG, a formula grant program, the Kansas Local Bridge Improvement Program, FTA 5307, Urbanized Area Formula Grants. These are just a few of many that can help with maintenance needs. Next slide, please. 4.3, Intelligent Transportation Systems. It's has a summary of the regional ITS infrastructure and its role in the region. I would also suggest seeing Appendix H for the regional ITS architecture appendix for more information. This map shows all of the different cameras along the highway system within Wichita and some just outside of the Wichita city boundary. Next slide, please. .4, safety, gives an overview of the safe system approach, and then has a summary of our regional safety action plan, relevant statistics, and it goes over the identified safety emphasis areas, which includes intersections, speed, and vulnerable road users. Again, I'd also see Appendix I for the complete comprehensive safety action plan. Next slide, please. So 4.5 and 4.6 look at transportation demand management and congestion management. So transportation demand management provides an overview of a set of general strategies designed to optimize transportation efficiency, improve travel options, and promote sustainable mobility without expanding roadway capacity. And then it also showcases forecasts from our travel demand model. Again, you can see Appendix F for even more information beyond this section. And then 4.6, we have the congestion management process. So it discusses congestion management and also our federally required congestion management process, or CMP document, which forms Appendix G of the MTP. Next slide, please. And then finally, 4.7, system resilience, describes ways to improve transportation system resilience to natural disasters and climate change, and explores the NPO's role in assessing infrastructure vulnerability in coordinating with local planning agencies. Okay. Next slide. And that brings us to Chapter 5, System Performance. And it has just two categories, our federal and regional performance measures. Next slide. So 5.1 examines the required federal performance measures for the WAMPO region. That includes a group of safety measures, collectively known as PM1 or Performance Measure 1s, a group of pavement and bridge condition measures, again, collectively known as PM2. PM3 is a set of system performance measures, and then also transit asset management measures. It also shows the state performance measure targets, or the state's performance measure targets that WAMPO supported in 2024. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see our PM1 safety metrics for the region for the past 5 years. There's, of course, more information in the chapter if you'd like to see the full tables. Next slide, please. And then 5.2, our regional performance measures. So it explores several regional measures beyond those required. So we looked at our commuter mode share, average travel time to work, greenhouse gas emissions, and our sidewalk multi-use path network length. On an example, you can see the Metropolitan Statistical Area commuter mode share. So this is actually all of WAMPO and a little bit more, but it looks at the mode shares of how people would commute to work. So you can see, of course, the largest cohort there would be drove alone. And then you can see in that purple, the distinct climb in the amount of people that work from home as compared from 2019 to 2021. From the census, the 2020 data was unavailable, just related to data collection challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think that wraps it up for performance measures. Next slide, please. Then I will turn it back over to Nick.
Thank you, Peter. I will now go over the financial plan chapter. As I mentioned earlier, the point of this chapter is to demonstrate that the MTP is fiscally constrained, meaning that the combined costs of all of the projects listed in the plan, plus projected operations and maintenance costs for existing infrastructure and services in the region, are less than or equal to projected revenues for transportation in the region over the same period. In addition to calculating this fiscal constraint for everything put together, we also separated out for KDOT projects and infrastructure, for public transit, and for local government other than public transit. This was done because these three categories of organizations typically are in charge of separate facilities and separate services and have very different funding sources that they draw from. It was also separated out into three time bands of 2025 to 2028, 2029 to 2038, and 2039 to 2050. Those time bands I will get into more in the discussion of the next chapter. The baseline assumption was to conservatively assume, unless otherwise noted, a 1% per year increase in assumed revenues, and to assume that operations and maintenance costs would increase at an inflation rate of 4.5% per year. 4.5% being the default inflation assumption that the Kansas Department of Transportation uses. Next slide, please. There are 147 projects in this MTP in the fiscally constrained list, for a total of $2,770,360,453 of estimated cost. Obviously, that is false precision when you get down to that point, but that is what the estimates add up to. There are 28 of these projects are bridge rehabilitation and replacement projects, 10 are traffic management technology projects, 69 are roadway reconstruction and modernization projects, 12 are roadway expansion projects, i.e. increasing the number of through lanes, 2 are projects for new roadways where there weren't any before, 11 are for multi-use trails and bicycle facilities, 6 are for pedestrian facilities, 6 are for public transit, and 3 are for general planning purposes, with 71 of these projects in the first time band, 66 in the middle time band, and 10 in the last time band. Next slide, please. And by the way, this last table and this one can both be found on page 12 of chapter 6. And as you can see here, of those 147 projects, 7 are KDOT projects, 6 public transit, and 134 local government other than public transit. Next slide, please. These next few slides all come from a table on page 13 of chapter 6. These just to cover the final fiscal constraint analysis summary. First, the one for KDOT, with and it is assumed in. No, scratch that. We can go on to the next one. Thank you. For public transit, there is the additional row here of other revenues, i.e. for fares and advertising on transit vehicles. Again, it shows fiscal constraint, no negatives down at the bottom. Next slide, please. And likewise for local governments excluding public transit. Next slide, please. And finally, for all three of them put together. So the main thing is making sure that at the bottom of this table, we have positive numbers, and I am glad to report that we do. Next slide, please. And now to finally get into chapter 7, project selection and list. Because this is where we came up with the list of projects whose fiscal constraint that last chapter was meant to demonstrate. These projects came from a call for projects that ran from September 15th, 2023 through February 2nd, 2024. WAMPO staff and consultants scored these projects according to an assigned rubric and also reflected them in the previously mentioned travel demand model. The project scores and scopes and estimated costs and a bunch of other information about all the submitted projects were given to the project selection committee of WAMPO to consider, and they came up with recommendations on October 3rd, 2024 that were taken to the WAMPO Technical Advisory Committee for a concurring recommendation on October 28th, 2024, and were finally approved by the Transportation Policy Body, our governing body, on November 12th, 2024. Next slide, please. As mentioned in the discussion of fiscal constraint, the projects were all mentioned in specific time bands. The first time band, 2025 to 2028, corresponds to the period of the current federal fiscal year 2025 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program that was adopted just last August 13th. This 4-year TIP is our short-range planning document that is meant to be guided by the long-range MTP. And so it made sense to have a time band reflecting the time horizon of that shorter range plan in the longer range plan. And then after that, we had to 29 to 38 to cover the next 10 years. Then one more time band for the outer years of 2039 to 2050, covering the remainder of the planning horizon for the last 12 years. Next slide, please. I don't have to go into this too much more because I already mentioned it. Projects were divided into KDOT projects, public transit projects, and local government projects other than public transit, although many of those do have specific lead agencies affiliated with them in the list that we will see in a moment. Next slide, please. In addition to specific projects that were submitted during the call for projects being put into the list, also included are several categories of projects that are able to get into the short-range TIP by virtue of being in one of these categories in the MTP. This is done because projects in these categories are not only something that happen very frequently, but often on short notice. And therefore, it is hard to plan 25 years out into the future which ones will need to be included. And that is why they're included as categories, such as public transit projects, bridge projects, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, traffic flow and safety improvements, intelligent transportation system projects, and regional studies. Projects may also possibly qualify for funding on the basis of being consistent with the vision and goals of MTP 2050. Next slide, please. Now, just a couple of quick maps here. A map of those projects that are mappable, not all of them are, like planning projects and public transit projects. But these are all of the mappable projects color-coded by time band. Blue for the first time band, green for the middle one, and red for the last one. Next slide, please. And again, projects by project type are shown in this map. Again, all the project locations, and you can find this map on page 6 of chapter 7 and the previous map on page 7. Sorry for not mentioning that. Next slide, please. The project list includes 7 KDOT projects, all but one of them in the first time band. You can find this information on page 8 of chapter 7. Next slide, please. There are 6 public transit projects, all of which are category projects, as I described earlier, in order to make it so that projects of these types necessarily can get in. The FTA 5339 program is about buses and capital projects, and 5310 is for paratransit specifically. This is on page 8. Next slide, please. Now, most of the projects in MTP 2050 are local government projects, but not public transit projects. You can find these on pages 10, 11, and 12, I believe it is, of the chapter 7. In this first time band, 2025 to 2028, there are 63 projects, 5 of which are category projects. Most of these are also projects that already appear in the 25 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program. Next slide, please. And continuing that same project list and going on to the next one. And again, just note again at the bottom of this one, at the end of each of these time bands are those category projects of the bridge projects, the bike ped projects, the traffic flow and safety improvement projects, the ITS project, and the regional studies. Now we repeat the same thing basically for the middle time band of 29 to 38 with 63 total projects, including 5 category projects, coming mostly from the call for projects mentioned earlier. And continuing to the next page. And again, the 5 category projects at the bottom of this one, same as last time. And finally, page 12, a shorter list, unsurprisingly, of projects planned for the last time band. And all of the submitted projects from the call for projects got into one of these 3 time bands. So there were not any submitted that did not get into here someplace. And all these project costs were projected outward into the year of expenditure dollars for each of them, so that an inflation rate had to be applied in order to get all of these cost estimates that you see here. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. And finally, just again, a reminder of the appendices that I went over earlier, just listing them again here for your reference. And now I will turn things back over to Marky Jonas to get back to the public engagement part of this presentation and urge you to contribute your comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Peter, for a great overview of those chapters. As they said, there is a lot in this document. It really is a comprehensive look at the region, and it does plan ahead for the next 25 years. With that said, it is very important that we do have public feedback and engagement to ensure that the plan aligns with what the community wants. So I will state again, we are in our public comment period, which began on March 8th and will run through April 7th. The draft document is available on the project webpage. It is also available in a printed copy at the Wichita Advanced Learning Library. And then there are all of the chapters and the appendices. And then there's also an executive summary, which is about 20 pages that gives an overview in a bit of a more digestible format. And that is available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And then we also have some public events, for example, this one. And then we also are having an open house. We're super excited about that. We will have poster boards and attendees will be able to look at those at their leisure, engage with WAMPO staff, ask questions, and really just get another comprehensive look at the plan. And then comments, again, as I mentioned earlier, can be submitted on the website or by emailing wampo@wampo.org. And that wraps up the overview of the plan that we had planned today. So we just wanted to provide an opportunity for any questions or comments. We can do our best to answer those. And then again, please submit comments either by email or on the website so that we can ensure that they are in your words and that we can address them in the document in the way that they are intended. You can also add them in the Zoom chat and we can make sure that we get those documented as well. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to either type them or just speak up.
Hi, this is Jack Kane. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Back in chapter 6, I don't remember which page, it was talking about fiscally responsible or something, and it had a 1% and a 4% for increases.
Yes.
Can you explain that more? It went through pretty quick and I didn't really understand.
Yes, sorry. In the fiscal constraint chapter, chapter 6, we have to account for anticipated future revenues and future costs going forward. And we have to account, that includes accounting for inflation. And inflation, to an extent, extends to like a likely slight increase in funding availability over the long term. And for that reason, we put in an assumed 1% rate of increase in revenues per year going forward. But of course, it's hard to predict funding availability, especially since it comes from so many different sources. And therefore, we went with the conservative option of 1%, especially looking at past trends of transportation revenues increasing slower than the rate of inflation overall. And then we also then at the same time had to have a rate of increase assumed for costs, both for operation and maintenance costs of existing roads, sidewalks, buses, etc., and of the project costs. And those, we used 4.5% for an inflation rate. And this is higher than the other one, but we had a couple of reasons for choosing a higher rate. one, why we wanted to be conservative about assuming revenues, and two, because construction costs do have a tendency to increase faster than the overall inflation rate, and 4.5% is the default inflation rate generally used by KDOT. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like you're being pretty conservative, maybe, as far as you're assuming a 1% revenue increase, but you're assuming costs may go up 4.5%, and the numbers that you've used are based on the 4.5%.
Yes.
Okay.
And now keep in mind, we do update this plan once every 5 years. And so 5 years from now, we may recalculate for those outer time bands. So it's not like we're necessarily all the way locked in for 25 years at these conservative levels. And there is always the opportunity to adjust this stuff, but it's the best estimate that we have right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just had two more quick questions. One, will Augusta ever be considered part of this plan? And two, have you guys considered a Facebook page or a group for comments back? As I just went to your website, and I won't get to see anybody else's comments, it sounds like. And maybe it's designed that way. And I'll just let you guys answer.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. I certainly can start a Facebook page for those comments specifically. We do have the website ones, but I know those are not made public after they are submitted. So I will look into either having a Facebook post that multiple people can comment on, or looking into another format on the website.
And we will include comments in the final adopted plan.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Yes, all comments will be shared and updated into our public engagement appendix, and those will also be reported to the Technical Advisory Committee and Transportation Policy Body, as well as the staff action that was taken, how they were addressed in the final plan before that is approved.
But there's no need to provide any identifying information.
Correct. If you would like to, we can ensure that you're on email lists, and we can keep you informed of an action if one was taken, but otherwise it is not necessary.
Okay, and again, was Augusta ever going to be included in this plan?
That's a great question. Expanding the boundary involves analysis of how the urban area boundary is growing. In conjunction with Federal Highway Administration and Kansas Department of Transportation and our board members, and like many MPOs, they grow not at a faster rate to encompass, either Newton or Augusta. We do not foresee at this time, but sometime in the future it might. But we can initiate that conversation if you like us to initiate that to our partner agencies, and then we can have that dialogue and conversation. But we cannot predict at this time when or how that will happen.
Okay, thank you. No, you don't have to bring it up. I'm just looking at possible areas I can move to, because Andover property taxes are pretty high, and all this stuff that keeps happening costs money. So thank you.
But thank you. I appreciate your question, because regional encompassing and embracing as many cities like Newton and Augusta that has impacts on our economy is beneficial. Marky?
Yeah, if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to chime in. And I'll reiterate again, please do take a look at the website, at the draft chapters and appendices. We really would love that feedback. Make sure that we have the plan to the best that it can be before it is approved.
Thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.